looks as though the cases are going up.
While it's unclear what's leading to the surge, a new paper suggests that nose-picking may be a part of it. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Still see the stop in the Compton area. They've issued a SIG alert as you travel on that 91 eastbound, East 91 at Central. It's the off-ramp that's shut down with police activity. This is until further notice. In the meantime, that 91 East is very busy from at least Avalon Boulevard. Long Beach, trouble on the 710 South as you get to Long Beach Boulevard. Left lane blocked with a crash. We're seeing that tough drive on that 710, mainly from the 91 towards Willow. Eagle Rock, look out for some kind of debris here as you travel on the 134 eastbound side of the 134 around Colorado, Figueroa. Some kind of debris onto the right shoulder, but it's hanging in that right lane. Stay to the left.
Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night. So listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
NASCAR has given an indefinite suspension to a race car driver who liked an insensitive social media post and photo of George Floyd. Noah Gragson, who drives for the Legacy Motor Club, has been suspended from all NASCAR functions until further notice. Gragson was replaced for Sunday's race at the Michigan International Speedway. Gragson apologized for his actions. NASCAR is trying to be real about its commitment to social justice. The organization banned the display of the Confederate flag after Floyd's death in 2020. Simone Biles won the all-around competition at the Core Classic in Chicago. It was Biles' first competition since the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. She's attempting a comeback to earn a spot on the U.S. team for the Paris Olympics in 2024. Biles stepped away from gymnastics for mental health reasons. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversations when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
Baby, you understand me now. Sometimes you see that I'm mad. Don't you know no one alive can always be an angel? When everything goes wrong, you see some bad. But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and we're glad to have you along with us today. In this hour, is there a right way to talk about black culture? Everybody wants to exploit black culture. But how can we rethink the complexities of the intersections of politics, speech, and art, and reimagine a nuanced and new way of seeing and appreciating black culture? We'll try to make sense of all that in this hour with acclaimed University of Texas professor and author, Dr. Roger Reeves, whose new book is called Dark Days, Fugitive Essays. Dr. Reeves, good to have you on this program. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
It's my great delight to have you. Thank you. We have an hour, a lot to unpack in this hour. Let me start with some big and bold questions, if I may, and then we'll get more into the details of the text that you've written. Again, it's called Dark Days, Fugitive essays by our guest in this hour, Dr. Roger Reeves. I guess the big question I want to start with is how you read, even in this moment, historically. We just heard Nina Simone's voice, of course, and so we know the ways in which black culture has been exploited in years past. Let me start by asking, in this present moment, whether or not you still see, writ large, the exploitation of black culture.
Yes. How do I say? America moves on the exploitation of black culture. It's in our fabric. It's in the fabric of the nation. So yes, exploitation is still occurring. I think it just looks a little different. The way exploitation is going to look is going to change depending on who's doing it. Right. I think about, for instance, the way in which our protests can be used to, when we're protesting in 2020, the unrighteous killings of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, and the way in which corporations can use the images, right, to sell soda. Right. That's a way of thinking about exploitation. So yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Very much so.
In what ways, since you said it looks different, in what ways, to your mind at least, is black cultural exploitation different today? How does it look different today than it did back in the day?
Well, it depends on what days in the back we're talking about. You know what I mean? So,
fair enough.
So for instance, it's not, it's not enslavement. It's not segregation, right? We're not in those eras, right? But I think we are in an era of and this is what's interesting, is that we're in an era where I think sometimes we are complicit in our exploitation. And I think it's through things like social media, to be honest with you. I think there's a way in which social media, I know everybody wants to use it and we find it to be useful for certain ways, but I think there's a way in which social media is contributing to our exploitation, because what are we doing? What are we sort of posting our grievances for likes, for retweets sometimes, right, to build clout. So I find that I find the way social media, the way we interact with social media, the desire to be loquacious, right, to talk, right, being pulled always to talk and I don't know about what all this talking does sometimes. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I am a talk show host, so trust and believe. I want to come back to that talking piece, the talkative nature of our culture. I want to come back to that in this conversation. Trust and believe. Put a pin in that. We'll get to that. But it is always risky, and you obviously rolled the dice. It's always risky to say that black folk are complicit in their own exploitation, and yet you said that without any hesitation or equivocation whatsoever, sir.
Yeah, partly because I think I say that partly because I think sometimes I wonder if I'm going to say something, I'm going to use the big C word, capitalism, right? So I just wonder what our critiques of capitalism are, and the ways in which we sort of are interested in becoming bosses, right? And that's sort of the desire to be the boss, right? And I have to ask, what does that mean? Normally the boss is sort of putting workers to work in a way that's sort of for the benefit of the boss and not for the workers, right? And we know that historically that the workers have been us. And so I just want to the questions I want to ask us. A lot of this book is about actually talking to us about how are we participating, right, in our own liberation struggles, how are we thinking about the language of these things? How are we thinking about what does it mean to desire to be a boss? What does it mean to desire to get the bag? Yeah. Who has to be exploited to get the bag? Yeah. Right. Like if and it might not be black folks in America, but it might be us exporting that exploitation to China. No. To Africa, right? Like there's ways in which we have to think about, right, trying to enter into these like global supply chains and these global markets and become bosses and ballers
Okay.
and all that. Like,
let me do this. I see you about to take off now, and not even like a jet plane, like a rocket. Let me just pause for a second and say, given what he's already said, I got a whole lot of questions. It's gonna be a great hour, even richer than I perhaps thought. We're just getting started with Dr. Roger Reeves. His new book is called Dark Days, Fugitive Essays. We are going to talk about the exploitation of black culture, sometimes by black folk, on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
What does access mean?
Access means owning a home. Access means growing my business.
Access means building generational wealth.
No matter your goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Programs and initiatives provide the tools and resources to help you reach them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, life doesn't stop when cancer starts. After diagnosis, treatment is vital. But for some, just getting there, to appointments, chemo, or radiation, is a major challenge. You can change that. Volunteer to give rides with the American Cancer Society Road to Recovery program. Driving for a few hours of your day can make a life-saving difference for someone with cancer. Visit cancer.org/drive to learn more.
Have you heard about Lendistry? Lendistry is a national black-led small business lender that is headquartered right here. Lendistry provides flexible financing options starting at $50,000 to help you access the affordable capital needed to grow. Whether financing is needed to increase working capital, acquire a business, purchase inventory and equipment, or refinance debt, Lendistry has a solution for you. Lending products range from traditional business term loans and non-revolving lines of credit to SBA 7A loans and commercial real estate financing. Lendistry's free application process is simple and does not impact your credit score. Visit lendistry.com/KBLA to learn more and to get started with an application right from the website.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Dominique DePrima for KBLA Talk 1580. Are you worried about your credit score? Well, look, you can rebuild it. There are lots of factors that go into determining your credit score, but one of the most effective ways to improve your score is to consistently pay your bills on time, over time. If you're forgetful about payments, like me, try automating your bill payments. That way all your creditors get paid on time, and you'll have freed yourself of trying to remember. Whatever your financial goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Initiatives can help support you in reaching them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Made fresh daily in the Merck Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Indeed you are, and I'm glad about it. You're listening to Tavis Smiley in conversation with Dr. Roger Reeves, University of Texas professor, author of the new book, Dark Days, Fugitive Essays, and really just getting started in this hour, and it's going to be rich, as I said a moment ago. I was just sitting here during that break thinking, where am I going to start? Because you've already said so much, Dr. Reeves, that I want to interrogate. And let me start with this. And I say start with, I should say stay with. We were talking about the ways in which black people are complicit in our own exploitation. And by the way, in case you just tuned in, we're talking about whether or not there's a right way to talk about black culture. Everybody wants to exploit black culture, but how do we rethink the complexities and the intersections of politics and speech and art and reimagine a more nuanced way of seeing and appreciating black culture? So we're talking all things black culture in this hour with Dr. Roger Reeves, in case you just tuned in. With that reset, let me come back to this notion of our own complicity. It occurred to me as I was sitting here during that break thinking about what you had said heretofore, that there's no way one could argue necessarily that black folk were complicit in slavery and segregation. Certainly there is the narrative, and we know the truth, that there were Africans who sold other Africans into slavery. No question about that. We have to own that. But I'm talking about stateside. Once we get here, once we are brought here, as Maya Angelou said, we were stolen, bought, and sold into slavery, arriving on a nightmare, praying for a dream. That's Maya Angelou from a poem on the Pulse of Morning. So we're here now. So it's hard to argue that once here, we are enslaved, we are complicit rather in our own enslavement. We can't be complicit in that. We can't be complicit necessarily in Jim Crow or Jane Crow. That's what was done to us. So I want to just break this thing down for a second. To your mind, when did we get to a point in Black history where we became complicit rather in our own exploitation?
Well, can we nuance even slavery? So we have to nuance. We have to nuance like enslavement, and victim and victimizer, right? There's this really great book called Critique of Black Reason by South African writer, philosopher named Kilian Bembe, and he puts forth, and might I read to you just a few sentences that he puts forth about victim and victimizer on the plantation. Right. And so just briefly, just to give an overview, he says that, we think of enslavement as people being in very stable positions, like the enslaved were only victims, right? And so he offers that, he says, the blacks on the plantation were furthermore diverse. They were hunters of maroons and fugitives, executioners and executioners' assistants, skilled slaves, informants, domestics, cooks, emancipated slaves who were still subjugated, concubines, field workers assigned to cutting cane, workers in factories, machine operators, masters, companions, and occasionally soldiers. Their positions were far from stable. Circumstances could change, and one position could become another. Today's victim could tomorrow become an executioner in the service of the master. It was not uncommon for a slave, once free, to become a slave owner and hunter of fugitive slaves. So I know that's going like maybe ruffle some feathers, but one of the things we do have to think about is that these aren't stable positions, right? Victim and victimizer, right? And so I think that one of the things that I'm trying to think about in the book, right, and is the nuanced way that we're slipping back and forth, because there is a way, if once you travel outside the U.S. or you move with a U.S. blue passport into the world, there's a type of privilege that comes with that, right? Even if when we're here in the United States, the police are occupying our communities, right? And so one of the things I'm thinking about is, how do we negotiate that? How do we begin to sort of be aware of the way in which we can become in our seeking liberation, right? In our seeking freedom, we can also victimize, right? Which is something that I have to say I wasn't thinking about my whole life, right? I can't say I've always thought this way about where we are as Black folks, but I want us to think about this particularly because the black dollar, when it moves into the world very differently than the black dollar from Brazil, or even the black dollar from Nigeria, or the black dollar from Mozambique, right? Like, it's moving in the world very, very differently. Right. And when we're going about thinking about moving our money in the world and moving into the world, we are moving with a simultaneity, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Let me just say this before I move forward. At least the South African writer that you referenced a moment ago and read from his text, at least he didn't go full Kanye and say that slavery was a choice. I was bracing myself. I was bracing. So everything you read, is true. To your point, it ruffles some feathers. Just as I said moments ago, it ruffles feathers to remind Black people that some Africans did sell other Africans into slavery. Right. No question about it. It ruffles feathers. But again, he didn't go full Kanye. Thank God for Jesus that he didn't say that slavery was a choice.
No, it's not that at all. No, we're not saying that at all, right? But we also have to remember there were Black conservatives, right? I think there's this idea, one of the things to talk about how to talk, I love the question, who gets it. I think it's about the ethics and of talking about Black culture, right? How do we talk about Black culture ethically, responsibly, in a nuanced fashion, in a non-monolithic fashion, right? We're a diverse community. We have diverse interests, diverse desires, right? and that's what makes us beautiful, is that literal, like, not being the same.
Yeah. No. So let me do this then. Language matters. You know that, being a professor and being a writer, language matters. I hear the point you're making now, so let me just back up for a second and ask you then to critique, as you see it, the language that we employ, the way that we'll get to the white folk in a second, but critique for me, if you will, the way that we language our conversations about black culture.
This is interesting. One of the things I think, one of the ways that we language and the way we come in is, I think we always want to make our successes exceptional, right? It's about like being exceptional. I actually think that's really dangerous, because not all of us are going to be exceptional, and we don't need to all be exceptional, right? Some of us need to be mediocre, or some of us need to be in the middle, right? I think that we have to allow the nuance, right? Like we don't have to be magic, right? And magic our lives, right? Because I also think that when we're doing the magic black, hashtag black girl magic or hashtag black boy magic, what we're setting up is a certain type of, rubric and hierarchy that we might not always be able to hit. It also requires a type of perfection and a lack of maybe, the ability to make a mistake, right? Like, one of the things that I would love for us to be able to accept is that we're not, that we make mistakes, that we're learning, that we're growing, and that we can grow in front of each other, we can grow with each other, right? That we can have things like forgiveness, right? Like, to me, these are the ways in which I would love to see us begin to talk about, right, ourselves. And I think, but I think what we're doing is we're trying to sort of conjure and bring about like an aliveness, right? A beauty of being alive, right? And that's the thing that I would love to see. I think, there's many ways we talk about ourselves, but I think those are the ways in which I find to be a little problematic. Not problematic, just can we nuance this? Can we not always have to be exceptional? Right?
So yeah, I'm trying to keep up with you, man. You moving faster than a speeding bullet, and yet I'm sorry. No. Don't ever apologize for that, man. I love the way your mind works. And I this ain't my first rodeo, so I'm keeping up with you. I'm just saying you're moving fast.
I know you are.
Let me do.
I've been following your shows for years. I've watched and listened to your show since I was a boy. So this is exciting to me.
You were kind. It's exciting for me as well. Let me do this because you keep adding on. So there are two things running through my head. Let me do it in this order. One, I'm trying to juxtapose your notion, which I receive. I receive in the spirit that you offered it, and I wish it were more true, that we as black folk, speaking of black culture and black exploitation, that we would allow ourselves to make mistakes, and that we would find grace notes. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. That we would find grace notes when our brothers and sisters do in fact make mistakes, rather than getting into this trap that the larger culture is now engrossed in, canceling people. There's a distinct difference between allowing people obviously to make mistakes and having some humanity and some humility about that, versus canceling black folk who we don't agree with. Your thoughts about that dichotomy?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I wonder is I find America and Americans, we have, because we're such a young country, I find we don't have a great capacity yet for forgiveness, and for thinking about. I actually think this is why there's difficulty around like reparations for black folks, because you have to admit fault. And I think one of the most difficult things it seems to be for America is to believe that we have faults, we make faults, and when we do, we just get embarrassed by them and try to hide them, right? As opposed to saying, you know what, let's deal with sort of some of these things. Like I think about the Truth and Reconciliation Committees. Right? Sure. So in terms of canceling and things like that, and I think it's a difficult conversation that needs to be had about, right, that It's about justice too, and how we frame justice, how we think about what justice is. And I just wonder if we might not need to sort of reconvene and have different conversations around what do we really want? What is the justice we really seek?
Sure. Let me be more exacting about that. I think the last folk on the planet. Let me just preface this by saying that black people, as you well know, are the most forgiving people on the planet. Sometimes to our own detriment, but we are a very forgiving people. And somehow we have moved into this space from being a forgiving people to playing this game of cancel culture. And it just seems to me, to my point of being more exacting, the last folk on the planet to be engaging in cancel culture ought to be black folk. I mean, you cannot justify to me under any circumstance, any condition, ever, how black folk engage in canceling people. We are the last folk, given all that's happened to us, who ought to ever be engaged in cancel culture. That's just my read of it.
I hear you.
You disagree? You disagree?
No. I want to take it further.
Okay.
We should also be the last people to believe in prison. And to believe in the police. And to believe those senses of justice, because it's the same sense of justice. It's not rehabilitation. It's not redress.
Let me push back. Let me push back on the police part and the prison part. And I'm doing this for the sake of argument. I want to pull the best out of you, which obviously I ain't got to work too hard to do. It's coming out anyway. But let me push back. If black people are the disproportionate victims of violent crime, while we don't want just anybody being a police, we don't want rogue cops. If we are the disproportionate victims of violent crime, then why should we not believe in some sort of law and order?
How do we? I like how you like. For me, it felt like you slipped the yoke a little bit. What I mean is law and order, or what is law, what is order, right, is not always equivalent to the police.
Fair enough.
And to policing.
Fair enough.
Right. I think we can think about forms of justice. And this is going to be difficult because I don't think we would have to be very imaginative and radical in our imagining of what's possible. But we have to think about how law and quote-unquote order ultimately reinscribes conventional / white supremacist notions of power. All that to say is that the police are protecting property. The police are there to reinscribe what they've always been there to inscribe, which is to protect white people's property, right? And our justice system is there to foster that, right? It starts out of slavery. We can look at the new Jim Crow. We can think about all the different folks and scholars that have written about the history of policing and what policing really is about, right? And so I understand that we experience a disproportionate nature of life. But there's also, I remember when I was a teen, I was from Jersey, and I was really into researching prisons and like sort of the disproportionate ways that black folks are in prison. And I remember going to a youth facility, I think it was in Rahway in the 90s, and it's in my book, and I'm visiting there and I'm talking to the warden. The warden says to us, the average criminal in New Jersey is a 70-year-old white boy. But when you look in this folks in this prison, why is it? Because the justice system is green, right? And so what my issue with the way is that law and order is there to ensure order for certain people and to allow certain people to be sort of inside the law.
Fair enough. I receive that. As I said, you dropping jewels, dropping bars, as they say, so fast it's hard to keep up. When we come forward, though, I want to come straight away to this. You mentioned moments ago this notion of the pressure that we feel, that you wish we didn't feel, to always be exceptional. I want to juxtapose that notion of the pressure to always be exceptional with black excellence. To use your word nuance, I want to nuance this, because I don't think the pressure to always be exceptional is the same as striving for black excellence. That's my read. We'll unpack that when we come forward with Dr. Roger Reeves, author of the new book, Dark Days, Fugitive Essays. You're listening to Roger Reeves right now on Tavis Smiley.
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go. Shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit NoTimeToWait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Parents, we know we can't protect our kids from everything. Eventually, they're going to bump their heads or scrape their knees. But we can protect them from 6 types of cancer. HPV, or human papillomavirus, is a common preventable virus that can cause cancer later in life. The HPV vaccine prevents human papillomavirus and all the cancers it can cause. The American Cancer Society recommends getting your sons and daughters the HPV vaccine starting at age 9 to protect them later in life.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Another GOP presidential hopeful is scheduled to speak at next month's California Republican Party convention in Anaheim, California. African-American South Carolina Senator Tim Scott will address the convention on opening day. A pair of other hopefuls, former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, are scheduled to speak at the event the same day. COVID numbers are on the rise as the summer travel season wraps up. Baylor infectious disease expert Dr. Peter Hotez says this is a nationwide trend.
The good news was a few weeks ago we were about the lowest we've been in the United States, but now it looks as though the cases are going up.
While it's unclear what's leading to the surge, a new paper suggests that nose picking may be a part of it. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Still see the stop in the Compton area. They've issued a signal alert as you travel on that 91 eastbound, East 91 at Central. It's the off-ramp that's shut down with police activity. This is until further notice. In the meantime, that 91 East is very busy from at least Avalon Boulevard. Long Beach, troubles on the 710 South as you get to Long Beach Boulevard. Left lane blocked with a crash. We're seeing that tough drive on that 710, mainly from the 91 towards Willow. Eagle Rock, look out for some kind of debris here as you travel on the 134 eastbound side of the 134 around Colorado, Figueroa. Some kind of debris onto the right shoulder, but it's hanging in that right lane. Stay to the left.
Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night, so listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. At Blindster, we offer over 50 different custom window treatments, including faux wood blinds and shutters, all at prices less than retail. Plus, we'll send you free samples before you buy. Don't hire an expensive pro. Do it yourself and save big at Blindster.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
NASCAR has given an indefinite suspension to a race car driver who liked an insensitive social media post and photo of George Floyd. Noah Gragson, who drives for the Legacy Motor Club, has been suspended from all NASCAR functions until further notice. Gragson International Speedway. Gragson apologized for his actions. NASCAR is trying to be real about its commitment to social justice. The organization banned the display of the Confederate flag after Floyd's death in 2020. Simone Biles won the all-around competition at the Core Classic in Chicago. It was Biles' first competition since the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. She's attempting to come back to earn a spot on the U.S. team for the Paris Olympics in 2024. Biles stepped away from gymnastics for mental health reasons. No debate, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Our guest in this hour is Dr. Roger Reeves. In case you just tuned in, we are talking about whether or not there's a right way to talk about black culture. Everybody wants to explore our culture, but how do we nuance and find new ways to see and appreciate black culture? And we've been having a rich dialogue in this hour about the ways in which we are complicit oftentimes in our own exploitation when it comes to the culture that we have given the world. So much has been said already in this conversation, and I've been trying to keep up with Dr. Reeves. Let me come to this. As I said moments ago, this notion that you raised earlier, that you wish we as black folk, when it comes to our culture and the way in which we show up in the world, you wish that we didn't always feel the pressure to be exceptional. I take that. I receive that. And yet, to me, that's something different than this notion of striving for black excellence. I can be simpatico with you on the first point, so long as you're not telling me on the second point that this notion of achieving and striving for black excellence is problematic as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it is. Okay. I like one of the things that I think though is that these conversations are actually tied up in economies and finance and monetizing what is exceptional or excellence. Like one of the things I remember is I had a mentor. His name is Dr. Daniel Black, and Dr. Black once said, if you walk in your gift well enough, right, everybody will be able to benefit from the fruits of it or the beauty of it, right? But the benefit might not be financial, right? It might not be able to be monetized. Your excellence might not be monetized. So I'll give you a great example. There was I'm gonna tell you about this excellent black man that I had the fortunate enough to cross his path, had been fortunate enough to cross his path. His name was Mr. Percy. He used to live here in Austin, Texas. And he was this old black man that tended a garden at this doctor's office. And Mr. Percy was the epitome, I think, of beauty. And everybody that came by, and he would stand there after he was done gardening, and he would just sing to you. He would just sing a song, or he'd give you a flower. And I think of that as black excellence. But do we think of that as black excellence? He couldn't monetize that, but every student that crossed his path felt it. A glow, a light, a beauty. That to me is the type of excellence. Or I grew up in this Pentecostal church, and there was this older black woman named Mother Morris. And she made sure that at the end of every service, every child had a piece of candy, and they got a good word from her. And I remember some of the things she said. As a boy, she was in her 90s, and I remember that she took the time to talk to every child in the church. That's black excellence to me. Yeah. Right? Are we thinking about that alongside Serena Williams? Are we thinking about that type of black excellence alongside someone like a Cory Booker, right? Or Barack Obama, or whoever, right? I want us to think about the ways in which we are already sort of in our communities coming upon and living with and being blessed and our lives being sort of made beautiful by excellence. Yeah. Right, but we might not see these people as exceptional.
No. A couple of things. Number one, your mentor, Dr. Daniel Black, was a guest on this program literally 2 weeks ago. He was on this program, and we were talking specifically. I was trying to think what he was on for. We were talking. It just came to me. I invited him on. He was brilliant as always. We were talking about the doubling down that Ron DeSantis was doing at that moment on his notion that slavery was beneficial to black folk. And you can only imagine, since he's your mentor, you can only imagine that Dr. Black went all the way there when he showed up for that conversation about whether or not slavery was good for black folk. If you missed that conversation, by the way, all of our shows become podcasts. So you can always go to our Tavis Smiley, the TavisSmileyShow.com, the TavisSmileyShow.com, and listen to any show you may have missed. But I highly recommend the podcast of Dr. Daniel Black on this program just a couple weeks ago. You will be empowered and entertained by Dr. Black in that conversation. The second thing that comes to mind is you were talking about Mr. Percy. I thought of Mr. Wendell. You may be too young for that song. Remember Arrested Development, Mr. Wendell?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Wendell.
You got it. I thought of Mr. Wendell when you were talking about Mr. Percy and how that is also an illustration of black excellence. And so I take your point, but my mind went to Mr. Wendell and Arrested Development when you were literally you were painting a picture, and I was seeing that video and hearing that song in my head. That said, let me pivot now to this notion of everybody wanting to be a boss. Since you were talking about a few bosses a moment ago, from Serena to Corey to Barack Obama, a bunch of bosses and other names we could of course put on that list. And I'm fascinated by the critique that you started to offer earlier in this conversation about the things that we are willing to do, the ways that we are willing to show up, the things that we are willing to sacrifice to get the bag by any means necessary. You started down that path. I want to go a little further. So take me a little further down that path.
Yeah, so I think this is coming out of reading and stuff. So and reading and living, right? Living life. Like I think there's I want to nuance black. How do I say? I wish we could have conversations, and maybe this is the beginning. Maybe some conversations about having black businesses that circulate money within the black community. Like also, I'm thinking about Carter G. Woodson, right, The Miseducation of Negro, where he says the black scholar's job is twofold, right? It's to write the books, but also to create the businesses that help circulate money within the black community, right? I think I want to nuance that from becoming a mogul. Right. Like, I don't want people to think like Roger Reeves is out here talking about he's anti-business. This is not an entrepreneurship sort of thing, right? Like, I think, having a mom and pop shop in your neighborhood where people can come and buy groceries or buy food or buy clothes, right? That's different, right? Than you working for becoming an international conglomerate, or you become part of you're a venture capitalist, right? It's a VC firm or something. Those are very, very different sort of things, and I want to have sort of a nuance, more nuance. So when I'm critiquing in that moment of becoming boss is the desire to be a mogul, which is really the desire for exploitation.
But that's the goal. But that's the goal of every Negro in entertainment these days. Everybody's trying to be a mogul. Everybody wants to be on that Forbes list of a billionaire. I mean, you can see it. You can see the ways in which they move. It's not about serving their people. And I'm not, I'm like Jay-Z and Mary J. I ain't knocking no hustle. But you can see the ways in which they are moving. The goal is to be a mogul. The goal is to be on the billionaires list, and that is a sickness that I think has infused too many people I know in this business.
I don't disagree with you. I don't know none of them, but from afar, I can see it. I think that we have to look at where that desire comes from, right? And I think it's the American dream, American myth. Right, like you have to become this really larger than life figure, as opposed to who's I wish some of these celebrities would have sat down with, or who I would love to see is people forget that who Harry Belafonte is and what he meant to the civil rights movement, to the King family, right? To like the radicality, right? This was someone who was becoming the first black person to be successful in entertainment, to have his own talk show on TV, right? Like Harry Belafonte was doing all the things that these people, and was funding our most radical parts of our community and keeping our black leaders afloat so that they could do the job of going out and rallying the people and being activists, right? And I just wish we had a sort of a longer or a more robust understanding of that, right? And I wish the desire to be this mobile, like I wish some people would have been like, Harry Belafonte seems to be somebody that did this, right, in a very ethical way.
Well, the thing is that to your brilliant point, and Harry Belafonte was not trying to be a mogul. He wasn't trying to be on the billionaires list, and he did quite well in his life. But that was not the end game. And I think that's my critique and that's your critique. That ought not to be the end game. The end game ought not to be, I want to be a mogul. I want to be a boss. I want to get the bag. I want to be on the billionaires list. If that's your end game, then that's problematic, because again, that's not what Belafonte was all about. Neither was Belafonte's mentor, Paul Robeson, about that. And yet both of them were phenomenally successful and made grand contributions, but that was not the end game. I digress on that for now. We'll continue when we come forward. Roger Reeves, author of the new book, Dark Days, Fugitive Essays, on Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like
MC Light for AARP. Hip-hop, the cultural phenomenon that took New York by storm in 1973, is celebrating 50 years of rocking mics and crowds. Whether you're a ride-or-die hip-hop head or simply curious about its origins, check out the latest issue of AARP, the magazine. It celebrates this incredible milestone with a featured story brimming with fun hip-hop facts and history. Head over to aarp.org/black community to learn more.
Community is more than where you live. It's the people in it who go above and beyond to help it thrive. During the 50th anniversary of hip-hop and the 75th anniversary of Black radio, AARP recognizes the members, volunteers, people, and partners giving back to our communities. We believe when our efforts drive change for the greater good, we all thrive together. To learn more about how AARP supports efforts to keep our communities thriving, visit aarp.org/black community.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like Sprinklers in the Rain and Leaky Faucets. They're tunes from another time, because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on.
K-Drip. KBLA Talk 1580.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at J.P. Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour, and I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here is just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and they're putting their money where their mouth is at. So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community, and you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase, and give them another look if I go to another institution. I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right, Chase is doing their part to help advance Black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you and the African American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Sounds different. This is Tavis Smiley.
This conversation reminds me of watching my mama cook in the kitchen. There is no recipe, right? It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So if you ask, what y'all talking about in this hour? A little bit of this, a little bit of that. And all
we're talking about love simultaneously.
Oh, see, there you go. Don't get me started. Talking about the love thing. We'll get to that before we close, I hope. But that's what this book is. It's called Dark Days, Fugitive Essays. And it is a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I encourage you to check out the text. Again, it's called Dark Days, Fugitive Essays, written by our guest in this hour, University of Texas Professor Dr. Roger Reeves. Watching my timing is getting tight. Let me move swiftly to get you to unpack this for me. You critiqued earlier in this conversation the fact that we live in a culture now, and certainly as black people, since we're talking about black culture, where it's all talkative. Everything is just talk 24/7. Now, it sounds weird for me to say. I'm a talk show host. It's what I do, right? But you're speaking of something different, and I'm thinking of James Brown, the Godfather, talking loud and saying nothing. But critique right quick for me your notion of all the talking that we are doing these days.
Sure. So one of the things that I'm interested in the book is thinking about. Right now, we believe in like speaking truth to power, right? Like the only way to sort of be political, or the best way to be political, is to be speaking out and against things. And I think that is one version of a type of politics, right? Beseeching and going to your local politicians and asking them for redress and asking them to pass laws, legislation to create infrastructure help. I think those are important things. I'm not dismissing that in the book. What I want to offer is there are other strategies that black folks have historically used. And one of those was silence. And I think we forget the usefulness of silence. Like, for instance, there's this thing called the hush harbor. And the hush harbor, were at the edges of plantations, black folks would sneak off to the edges of plantations, to bodies of water, and they would have church in the manner that they wanted to have church in. This wasn't the church that their masters made them go to, right? They could sort of convene and celebrate their notion of God the way they wanted to, and often they would hatch plans for freedom, right? But they had to do it secretively. They had to do it sort of in this clandestine sort of fashion, right? And they used bodies of water to hush the sound. They believed if they got over bodies of water and, spoke the truths they needed to speak to each other and praised in the way they needed to be praised, right, that the water would hush the sound. So they were always courting silence and the sort of the diminishment of sound, right? I think about folks that would, steal away out of plantations, right? Like there was a way in which silence was part of something like imagining liberation. And I just wonder why we've forsaken that, right? Why we don't sort of continue these sort of underground notions, right? Even into the civil rights movement, right? Like Georgia Gilmore, right? She's the woman who baked the pies, who helped create, the alternative car system that allowed people during the bus boycotts to get to their jobs, right? And when they asked her, where are these pies coming from? Where's this money coming from? She would always say nowhere. This money comes from nowhere. And I think of that nowhere as a type of silence, right? Like this wasn't, we didn't need to be talking all the time. We just needed to be doing the work, selling these pies, right? And because if we talk, it's easier to infiltrate us. That's what COINTELPRO. It's easier to infiltrate movements.
I get it. When we come forward in our remaining moments, I want to interrogate then what, to your mind, silence looks like. I would say sounds like, but you take my point. What does silence look like in this present moment in late modernity for black people and our culture? We'll get an answer to that. One or two other things, hopefully, right quick, when we come forward and wrap our conversation with Dr. Roger Reeves on Tavis Smiley.
From the Merck Heart with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What does access mean?
Access means owning a home. Access means growing my business.
Access means building generational wealth.
No matter your goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Programs and Initiatives provide the tools and resources to help you reach them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, life doesn't stop when cancer starts. After diagnosis, treatment is vital. But for some, just getting there to appointments, chemo, or radiation is a major challenge. You can change that. Volunteer to give rides with the American Cancer Society Road to Recovery program. Driving for a few hours of your day can make a life-saving difference for someone with cancer. Visit cancer.org/drive to learn more.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take. And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan. Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
The Chase Ink Business Premier Card is made for people who make things happen, like me. I'm Sam, founder and CEO of Manifest, a product design company that makes everyday products designed smarter. I get 2.5% cash back on purchases of $5,000 or more, plus unlimited 2% cash back on all other purchases, which helps us make more smart ideas into a brilliant reality.
The Ink Business Premier Card. Learn more at chase.com/business premier. Chase for business. Make more with yours. Real business owner compensated for their participation. Account subject to credit approval. Restrictions and limitations apply. Cards are issued by JP Morgan Chase Bank. Any member FDIC.
On a Mission Youth Travel presents the 2023 Morehouse Homecoming HBCU College Tour, October 25th through October 29th in Atlanta, Georgia. Open to high school students grades 9 through 12. For more information, please call 323-298-4779. Again, 323-298-4779. Students will tour Morehouse College, Spelman College, Clark Atlanta University, Alabama State, and Tuskegee University. Email info@onamissionyouthtravel.com. Again, info@onamissionyouthtravel.com. The HBCU tour price includes all meals, transportation, round-trip airfare with one checked bag, hotel accommodations, all museums, college tours, and admission to the Morehouse versus Kentucky State University homecoming football game. Spaces are filling up quickly, so call today to sign up. 323-298-4779. Again, 323-298-4779.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
I've got 3 quick minutes here in this conversation, Dr. Reeves. Just 3 minutes left, and this dialogue, which I've enjoyed immensely. So let me do 2 things right quick in 3 minutes before this conversation gets silenced. To your point about the value of silence, what does silence look like in this moment?
I think it's not putting everything on social media, and particularly when we're trying to organize in ways that are going to benefit Black people but might be detrimental to the organizing of America at large. And so what I mean is, I think about the bus boycotts again, right? If we're gonna boycott, we might have to talk about that on the not on social media, right? We might have to figure out ways to create communities that will aid those that need help. Like I think about the ice storms. We had these terrible ice storms here in Texas, and the government just wasn't helping. And we had to ourselves in our own communities come together and figure out how we were going to help each other, right? And we did. And so there's these moments where I just think there's plenty of examples of how we might need to get together and figure some things out. And that figuring those things out might require us to actually appear to be silent, right? But we're actually doing the work and talking with each other in other spaces, maybe in the underground.
That's the main point which I take, which is you got to do the work. Talking loud and saying nothing, as I said earlier, quoting James Brown, but you got to do the work, and there's no way around it. In the 90 seconds I have left, right quick here, you mentioned that we've been talking essentially about love. I said a little this, a little that, and you said what we're really talking about, Tavis, is love, and you're right. So in 90 seconds, I'm gonna let you close on a love note, however you choose to do that, right quick.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think what I'm asking us, I remember growing up in Pentecostal church, and they always say, open critique is better than a secret love. And one of the things that came to mean is that sometimes we have to correct each other in front of each other rather than on the side so that we can sort of move forward together. And so one of the things I think we've been talking about this whole time is the ways in which we can strengthen the bonds between each other, the ways in which we can really be considerate of all of who we are, that we make mistakes, that we fall, that we falter, right? And that we shouldn't, that the goal is not to discard each other, but to find ways to call each other back and bring each other, make each other stronger. And I think that might be turning away from this quote-unquote exceptionality or the desire to monetize everything.
Nope, that's a powerful love note on which to end. I grew up in that same Pentecostal church, so I know of which you speak. His name is Dr. Roger Reeves, and the book is called Dark Days, Fugitive Essays. Dark Days, Fugitive Essays, Roger Reeves, University of Texas professor. An honor, sir, to have you on this program. We will do this again, I promise. All the best to you.
Love to. Thank you. Have a great one now.
Stay strong. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa